Hello everybody, my name is Thomas Galgani. I used to teach Russian to US military linguists. I personally learned the language as an adult and was eventually recruited to help instruct. I'm also a lifelong language learner, so I know how difficult and at times painful it can be to try to get better at listening in your foreign languages study. Now, I'm assuming you already have at least a very basic foundation in your foreign language that you're studying, but keep in mind that all of these techniques and exercises I'm about to share with you right now can be applied at any level, all the way from lower beginner to upper advanced. I'm going to tell you why we do these exercises and how to get the most out of them. Here we go. Tip number one is to practice dictation. This is listening to the target language and then writing down in the target language exactly what you hear, word for word, letter for letter. It doesn't have to be perfect spelling, but you want to make sure that it's close enough so that it doesn't alter the meaning. This is a great exercise because it forces you to focus on what you hear before what you understand, and it reduces the cognitive load of having to decipher meaning. Let's say you're trying to practice Russian and you hear the word krasny, which is Russian for red. You would write down krasny, and you're really not trying to think about that it means red. And you're definitely not trying to think about the English word for red or whatever your native language is. Show that you can separate the words and be precise with prepositions and everything as much as possible. If you're a beginner in your language, even just practicing one word at a time is great practice. If you're intermediate, advanced, and beyond, and you can understand conversations and even the news, I would try to go for 30 to 40 seconds at a time of a segment and then try to write down word for word. It's difficult, but writing in the target language and doing this dictation is great for testing your accuracy and making sure that you're hearing exactly what's being said. If it feels too difficult wherever you are, you can take a step back, go back to the basics and work on your vocabulary with things like digital flashcards, but also reading and following along while listening to segments will help train your ears to match what the spelling is like. All right, with proactive charting, now we're getting into understanding, and this is going into a listening segment with predetermined details that you're going to be looking for. This could be something like the 5 W's, who, what, where, when, and why, as well as something like a Venn diagram if you're going to be comparing and contrasting two elements, or any kind of specific questions that you prepare ahead of time. This exercise can actually be done in either the target language or in your own native language. One of the things I like about proactive charting is I find it very similar to real life engagements. If you're in a conversation with somebody, there are usually sets of information that you're looking for. Especially if you're surfing the web and you click on something, there is specific information that you want to find answers to. The idea is by looking for specific details, it is more active and you're really searching for that ahead of time. Of course, you can't always know what the material is going to be about, but a lot of times you can at least have a general idea. And if you get in the habit of actively looking for information ahead of time, then your listening proficiency is going to go up because you'll just be actively listening that much more. Okay, now it's time for consecutive, or what some people call asynchronous recall. This is when you're listening to a segment in the target language and then you're not taking a bunch of notes, you pause, and then you recall what you just heard in your own words, either in your native language or in the target language, depending on what you're trying to work on. Of course, it's great to be in an immersion environment and then stay in the target language as long as possible, but you don't want to fall into the trap of just regurgitating different phrases that you heard. You want to make sure it's in your own words, and I recommend, again, that you document it somehow, either in writing or verbally with a person who can kind of give you feedback so that you make sure that you understand what it is. I fall into this trap, plenty of times myself if I'm on a walk and then listening to a podcast and then I get distracted when it's quiet and I go back and listen to something that I found interesting. Turns out that I missed a very key detail. Track your progress so that you can check yourself. The biggest difference between this and something like proactive charting is you're not necessarily looking for individual specific sets of detail. You want to be as detailed as possible, but it's much more inclusive and I guess you could say passive if you want to call it that way, but you're more importantly trying to absorb as much of the message as possible. If you're a beginner, again, don't worry about how advanced your sentences are. You don't have to go crazy and listen to a bunch of stuff you can't understand. The biggest thing here is just that you're pausing and then you're recalling it in your own words, regurgitating as little as possible. I've said it before, you can't really master a language because it's always changing, it's always evolving, and it's kind of a living thing, but you can definitely master sections of it. And basic sets of idioms is definitely an area that you want to try and master. Again, there are always going to be new phrases that are forming and evolving, but you want to master some of the basic ones. The reason for this is because they rapidly expedite communication. And when a native speaker says an idiom, a lot of times it only takes the first word for the message to be conveyed. We can use English as an example. Let's say that somebody is waiting for somebody else to make the next move, and you say, I already sent you the email, or I already texted you, the ball's in, you can finish that, the ball's in your court. Right? Another one is, yeah, that would be great to do. We can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Okay? Just even hearing the initial part of it, especially with some context involved, the message is already going to be delivered without the person even hearing the entire thing. So idioms kind of act as time compression. They rapidly expedite communication. You're going to be improving your listening comprehension because you won't even need to hear the whole thing. You'll just know where these different words come from. And it's more like pattern recognition, actually. I said this or this happened, and then this person can respond this way. I hear the first word, I already know what they're talking about. One listening technique that a lot of people like to use is increasing the relevance of the audio through empathy. And what that basically means is putting yourself in the shoes of the protagonist, or it could be imagining that it's a loved one involved. We'll take an example. Let's say you're hearing on the news, in your native language even, you're hearing on the news about a natural disaster that's happening in some part of the world that you've never heard of before, and you couldn't find it on a map if you had to. You might go, that's sad. Let's say you hear that place and you recognize that it happens to be the place where a loved one of yours is currently visiting right now. You're probably going to tune into that news a lot more, wanting to know what's going on, who's been affected by it, how many people have been hurt or killed by it. This one is a bit of a twist and is an example of how modalities can sometimes complement each other, but research shows that if you improve your pronunciation in a foreign language, a lot of times it can improve your listening comprehension. This is especially true with tonal languages. I would even recommend hiring a speech coach who is also a native speaker of the language. If somebody who specializes in that, that's an amazing thing if you have the budget. If you don't have that opportunity, you could also record and compare snippets. This is something I talked about in a fluency for speaking video, basically where you record something or you get a recording of a native speaker saying something and then you record yourself saying the same thing back, and then you try to match it as close as possible, see how they're different, and then when you practice your pronunciation that way, a lot of times in turn your listening comprehension will improve because your speaking improves. That's what the research shows, and for me personally, it's also helped quite a bit. Don't be too hard on yourself with this one, especially something like accents. Don't worry about your accent. Just even getting the nuanced sounds down is a great start, but keep in mind that one modality or two, for example, listening or reading, can easily surpass the other ones. That's okay, but it's good to sometimes work on the other ones to complement the others. They can help out each other a lot more than you think. This one goes for practicing all modalities in your language, but especially reading and listening. Listening, I found it really helps if you have input that is meaningful to you, that's relevant to your life. Of course, tip 5 will help you when you have to listen to things that aren't specifically relevant to you. You can kind of use your imagination a little bit, but when you're structuring your own lessons and your own practice, keep in mind that you don't always have to start with the things that your class tells you have to. I mean, do your homework, do the things that your teacher is telling you to do, but in your own time, I would start with material that is most interesting to you, because that's also the material that you're gonna wanna activate the most and that your brain is gonna tune into that much more. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.